Instead, they watched Rome choose something far more deliberate. The empire had perfected a different kind of victory, one that didn't just destroy enemies, but reshaped them into warnings. Rome knew how to break rulers without killing them, turning defeated monarchs into living symbols of imperial dominance. For women who wore crowns, defeat carried a particular cruelty. Roman punishment was not simply about ending resistance. It was about stripping away dignity, authority, and identity itself. And Roman law provided no refuge. Queens, despite their former power, were granted no special protection once their armies fell. Under Roman law, war captives existed outside the moral universe of citizenship. The principle known as ius gentium, or the law of nations, held that military defeat transformed free people into property. When a city fell or an army surrendered, its inhabitants were no longer legally human in the Roman sense. They became spoils, enslaved not by chains alone, but by statute. A queen held no greater legal standing than the lowest infantryman in her shattered ranks. Her crown did not follow her into captivity. This framework created a stark and terrifying divide. Roman citizens possessed rights that shielded them from the worst abuses of state power. To flog a citizen was scandalous. To execute one without trial provoked outrage. But foreigners, no matter how noble their blood, stood beyond those protections. They could be beaten, displayed, sold, violated, or killed entirely at the discretion of their captors. Roman law made no exception for gender, none for royalty. The 12 Tables, Rome's earliest legal code from the 5th century BCE, established this reality with chilling clarity. Prisoners taken in war became property of the Roman state, or were distributed among soldiers as rewards. Women who had ruled kingdoms learned that authority meant nothing once it was replaced by iron restraints. Tacitus recorded this reality when describing the fate of defeated British royalty. Roman officials, he noted, showed no hesitation in abusing those who had once commanded armies and dispensed justice. Power, once lost, offered no shield. Female captives faced additional dangers. Roman military culture, shaped by centuries of conquest, viewed captured women as spoils of war. While a small number of elite prisoners might be temporarily spared, held for ransom or negotiation, most encountered immediate degradation. The distinction between prisoner of war and slave existed largely in theory. In practice, defeat erased status entirely. Nowhere was this reality more visible than in the Roman triumph. A triumph was not merely a parade, it was a ritualized performance of domination. When the Senate granted a victorious general permission to celebrate, Rome prepared a spectacle designed to overwhelm the senses and imprint power onto memory. The procession wound nearly 4 kilometers through the city, stretching from the Field of Mars, through the Forum, and up to the Capitoline Hill. Every element followed a deliberate order. Musicians and performers led the way, filling the streets with sound. Behind them came carts displaying painted scenes and elaborate models of conquered cities, visual proof of Rome's reach. Exotic animals from distant lands followed, chained and struggling, offering citizens a glimpse of worlds that now bent to Roman will. Then came the prisoners. Shackled and exhausted, they formed the emotional core of the spectacle. Captured rulers were placed at the front, often dressed in their royal garments. The intent was unmistakable. These were not anonymous captives. These were kings and queens who had once defied Rome. Queens who had commanded armies now walked in chains as crowds jeered, laughed, and celebrated their humiliation. The contrast was deliberate. Royal robes paired with shackles communicated a message that echoed far beyond the city walls. no throne was safe, no crown untouchable. The triumph served multiple purposes. It glorified the general. It reassured Rome's citizens. It warned allies and enemies alike. But it also satisfied a darker appetite, the desire to see power reduced, resistance crushed, not just militarily, but psychologically. For captive queens, the ordeal lasted an entire day. The procession moved slowly, intentionally, allowing spectators along the route to study every detail. Each step forced the defeated to confront their fate in full view of thousands. Some would survive the day, others would not. The uncertainty itself was a form of torture. Queen Zenobia of Palmyra understood this reality as she entered Rome. Zenobia had built an empire that stretched from Egypt to Anatolia, openly challenging Roman authority in the east. When Emperor Aurelian finally defeated her in 272 CE and captured her as she fled toward Persia, he gained more than a military victory. He captured a symbol. 2 years later, during Aurelian's triumph in 274 CE, that symbol was placed at the center of Rome's grandest display. The Historia Augusta describes the scene in striking detail, drawing on what appears to be eyewitness testimony. Zenobia did not appear broken. She was adorned with jewels that caught the sunlight, transforming her into a dazzling spectacle. The wealth of the East shimmered on her body, each gem reinforcing the scale of Rome's conquest. But it was the chains that commanded attention. They were not simple restraints. Zenobia was bound in massive golden chains, so heavy that guards walked beside her to help support their weight. Gold was chosen deliberately. These chains represented the wealth she once commanded, now converted into the instrument of her humiliation. Her body became a living display of conquered riches. Ancient sources emphasize her composure. Despite the physical burden and the hostility of the crowd, Zenobia carried herself with restraint and dignity. That defiance may have saved her life. Aurelian, whether impressed by her bearing or calculating that her survival served Rome better than her death, chose mercy, or something resembling it. Zenobia was spared execution. Instead, she was granted a villa near Rome. Some accounts claim she married a Roman senator and lived among the aristocracy, her daughters marrying into noble families. Whether this was mercy or a subtler form of captivity remains debated. Zenobia lived out her remaining years not as a ruler, but as a reminder. Her survival itself became propaganda. A queen who once defied Rome now existed only at Rome's pleasure, and she was not alone. The empire had many ways of teaching its enemies what defeat truly meant. Not every queen was granted Zenobia's measured fate. For many, Roman domination arrived not with golden chains, but with violence meant to terrorize an entire people into silence. In 60 CE, King Prasutagus of the Iceni died in Roman Britain, leaving behind a kingdom balanced on a fragile compromise. In his will, he attempted to safeguard both his family and his autonomy. Half of his territory was left to Emperor Nero, the other half to his 2 daughters. Prasutagus believed this gesture of cooperation might preserve his dynasty and keep Rome satisfied. It achieved neither. Roman officials, led by the imperial procurator Cottus Decianus, ignored the will entirely. Iceni lands were seized. Property was confiscated. The kingdom was declared forfeit as though the agreement had never existed. When Queen Boudica protested this violation, Rome responded with calculated brutality. Tacitus records what followed with unusual directness. Boudica was publicly flogged. The act alone carried immense symbolic weight. Even under Roman law, corporal punishment required justification. To flog a queen of an allied kingdom was not discipline, It was deliberate humiliation. But the violence did not end there. Boudica's daughters, likely young, unmarried, and vulnerable, were assaulted by Roman soldiers. Tacitus describes the violations in stark, restrained language, offering no embellishment. His economy of words only heightens the horror. These acts, he makes clear, were not incidental. They were central to Rome's strategy. The abuse was public. Performed before the Iceni people, it sent an unmistakable message. Royal blood